Hey, I hope that everyone's doing well today. So this is section 3.4 and it's about writing equations. So we've been dealing with linear equations. We've been graphing them and finding their slopes. Now what we're going to want to do is be able to take some information and write the equation, kind of go the other way. Writing equations is a very important skill in math because that's how we do most of our modeling. That's how we take lifelike situations and turn them into math so that we can solve them. So writing equations is a very powerful idea. So now we're going to use, just throughout this whole lesson and throughout this, anytime I ask you to write a linear equation, we're going to just do everything with the point-slope formula. There are other formulas and other ways, but this one works in all situations, so you don't have to learn other weird techniques and try to remember 7 different ways of doing it. So here's how the formula looks. Y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. And I'll tell you what some of the pieces are. So right here, obviously, m is where our slope is going to go. We've already talked about slope and how to find slope in certain situations, and we know that m stands for slope. Now you see the x and the y value right here and right here that both have a subscript of 1. Both of those are going to come from a point. Okay, and so this is the x value from that point, and this is the y value from that point. Okay, so really, now notice this y does not have a subscript, so this one's going to stay put. We're not going to change this one. This is going to stay as a y, and this one's going to stay as an x, because all of our linear equations have a y and an x in them, so those in boxes stay. So maybe I'll write that out to the side. They stay a letter, stay as an x or a y. Okay, so these with arrows are the numbers that we're going to plug in. These are going to be numbers. So you just need 3 numbers, or really 2 pieces of information, a point and a slope. So that's why I have this needs question here. So all we need to write equations is you need a point and a slope. And that's all we're going to use is a point and a slope, and that's all we're going to need to write equations. Now I will go ahead and tell you, we're going to look at a few different possible questions today that you could get on the test. And every single setup gives you a point, but most of them you have to do the work to find the slope. So this is kind of some pre-work, or work before we can actually find the equation. We might have to find the slope. But we're lucky, we've already spent a lesson or 2 lessons working on finding slope. So before we can write our equation, we may need to find slope. We'll always give you that point. Okay, so this is going to be really simple to use this formula. All we have to do is plug in our 3 numbers, the x, y point, and the slope, and then we're going to need to convert it to y equals mx plus b, which is a simple 2 steps. Distribute the m and add this y term over. Distribute the m and add the y term over. So that's really simple to convert that to y equals mx plus b. So let's actually jump into an example. So the first one, I'm going to make it really simple. I'm going to give you the point and the slope, and then we will build from there. Okay, so write the equation of a line through this point, negative 3, 4, with a slope of 2. So before I start, I want to do 2 things. I want to write the formula out. I would suggest you do this every time. Whoops, and I'm writing the wrong formula. Let me try this again. Every time you do these, just to get this formula in your head. So y minus y1 equals m, parentheses, x minus x1, close parentheses. And then I want out to the side to write my needs. My needs for writing the equations are always the same 2 things. I need a point and I need a slope. So look at the information given. Do I have a point? And if you look right here, yeah, I told you a point that the line runs through, negative 3, 4. Do I have a slope? Yes, my slope is right there. It is negative 2. So these are the pieces of information that I'm plugging in. Now you may want to label these if you are apt to accidentally mix up your x's and y's. Remember, these are an ordered pair, and they're going to be x, y. Okay, they're going to be the x1 and y1. So we can plug in for these values the 3 numbers. Okay, so the slope is what? Negative 2. That's going to go in for m. The point is negative 3, 4. So the x value from this point is negative 3. The y value from this point is positive 4. So let me just take the time to rewrite what I have. I have y minus 4 equals negative 2 parentheses x minus, notice it's a minus sign, and then I have a negative 3, so be very careful with signs there. Okay, keep the minus signs and then plop the sign in. So I have minus a negative. Okay, so now is when I may want to make changes. So y minus 4 equals negative 2x minus a negative is the same thing as plus 3. Those two negatives make it a plus. All right, so now I've plugged in my three numbers. I've used the formula. I would just like to get it into, let's see, get to y equals mx plus b slope-intercept form, because this is the form we use in this class. If you're using this point-slope formula, it is always going to be the same two steps, and it's quite simple. I'm going to need to distribute. Okay, so y minus 4 equals, say, negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times this positive 3 is going to be a minus 6, or negative 6. And then I just need to solve for y. Well, how do I get rid of this minus 4? I just need to add 4 to both sides. Now, where is the 4 going to go? Am I going to add it to the x or to the plain number? I need to add it to this number here, this minus 6, because these are like terms. Neither one of them have x's. This 2x has an x with it, so it is not like the 6. It is not like the 4, so I cannot add or subtract it. So now let's see what our final answer is going to be. I will end up with y equals negative 2x, and then be really careful with the signs here. Remember, this negative sign belongs, or this minus sign belongs to the 6. So this is like a negative 6 plus 4, which would be a negative 2. If you wanted to use your calculator and you're considering this, an easier way to think about it, instead of writing it underneath plus 4, is to write it out to the side, and then I can just do this piece in my calculator, minus 6 plus 4. But I think we're to a level where we can handle this. So there we go. We have written our first linear equation. We gave you a point, we gave you a slope. Those happen to match up with our two needs. We plugged in those three numbers, and then we just distributed and got y by itself. So pretty simple. This formula is awesome because it always works. Okay. Now, let's do another example, because I told you that you would not always be given the slope. You might have to do some work to find the slope. So let's look at this next example. So we want to write the equation of a line that passes through the points 1, 3, and 2, 7. So let's talk about our needs for a second. Needs. I need a point. Do I have a point? Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have 2 points. I can pick either one. I like smaller numbers, so I'm going to pick 1, 3. It does not matter which one you pick. Either point will work. Now, we also need a slope. But look here, I don't have a slope. Well, before I can start my problem, I need a slope. My question is, can you find a slope? Well, what information do we know? All I know is 2 points. But wait a second. Don't we know how to find slope with 2 points? Yeah, that was from about 2 lessons ago. Remember that y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1? So we're tying in things from last lesson, or 2 lessons ago, on how to find slope. So I can find slope using this formula. Let's see. I may want to label them x1, y1, x2, y2, to be careful not to crisscross things. So that'll be 7 minus 3 on top and 2 minus 1 on bottom. Make sure I didn't crisscross anything. y2, y2, y1, y1, x2, x1. Okay, I'm good. And let's see. 7 minus 3 is 4. 2 minus 1 is 1. 4 over 1. That reduces to just 4. So I do have a slope now. I worked to find my slope. So do you understand, before I can write the equation, I have to have these needs met. I need a point. I actually have 2. I can pick either one. and I need the slope. I had to work to get the slope. So this is like pre-work. It's work before we can actually answer the question. We just need to make sure we have these two needs met, point and slope. So now I should be able to go about my business of using my point slope formula. So what I'm going to do is write the formula down. It helps to write it down every time. And let's see. I need to plug in my three numbers, my x1, y1, and m. And let's see, what is the slope? It's 4, so a 4 is going to go in there. What's x1? It's 1. And what's y1? It's 3. And so let's plug these in. Once again, notice there's subtractions in the formulas. All of these are positive, so none of the signs change. All right, awesome. So now I just need to get to y equals mx plus b. So that's always going to be two steps. Distribute the 4. So let's see, that'll be 4x. Be careful and make sure you remember to distribute to both numbers. So minus 1 times a 4 is a minus 4. And bring down your y minus 3. After you distribute the slope, you need to get y by itself. So I'll need to add this 3 over. So y will equal 4x. Now be very careful. I'm going to circle this for a second. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. Be very careful with this sign on that last number because that's where a lot of people make mistakes. All right, awesome. So we're doing well. The only difficulties, or not difficulties, but the only extra work is just finding the slope. So I have two more examples I want to do with you, but before we do them, I want to talk about two types of lines because finding the slopes where most of the work is before we can plug in. And sometimes we like to hide the slope in a sneaky way, and it has something to do with parallel and perpendicular lines. Okay, so just a refresher, if you don't know what parallel and perpendicular lines are lines that have the same steepness to them. They never intersect. They run side by side, and they're never going to cross. Perpendicular lines are lines that do cross, and they do cross at a 90-degree angle, or right angle. We don't ask you questions about what they are, but we do use some important facts about them, okay? And you can probably guess the facts relate to slope, because that's really all we need to write equations is a point and slope. So here are the two important facts about parallel lines, or there's one fact about parallel lines and one fact about perpendicular lines. So if I have two parallel lines, they're going to have equal slopes. That means the slopes are going to be the same. So if I know two lines are equal, or not equal, if I know two lines are parallel, their slopes are going to be the same. So think about this for a second. If I could get the slope of one of those two lines, so say I have two parallel lines, let me just draw two, and I can get the slope of that line, well then it will be the same slope as this line. I'm going to use that fact in the next example, or one of the next two examples. I can't remember which I do first. I'm going to use that fact to find a slope to be able to write an equation. Now, perpendicular lines has a funnier fact. They don't have equal slopes, but they have opposite reciprocal slopes. Whew, that sounds like a mouthful, but we've actually studied these two words, opposite and reciprocal. We've studied these two words way back in chapter 1. So opposite means that's dealing with negatives and positives. So that means whatever the slope of this line is, the perpendicular line here is going to have a slope that is opposite signed. So it's talking about negative or positive. So if this solid one is positive slope, this dotted one's going to have a negative slope. And then a reciprocal. Remember, reciprocal meant that we're going to reciprocate or flip the fraction. So say this one is, say it's, 5 over 2. Well, then this one's going to be two things, the opposite of it. So this was negative, positive, so this one will have to be negative. And reciprocate it, flip it. So 5 over 2 would become 2 over 5. So whenever lines are parallel, there's this strange relationship with their slopes. I know, that's a lot to soak in, but I can use that fact to find the slope of my line the line that I'm working on. So say I was trying to write the equation of this dotted line, and all I know is this line. If I could find this slope, I know my slope. If two lines are equal and I'm trying to write the equation for this top parallel line, this bottom line, let's say I know information about it, I could find its slope and use that same slope. Okay, so this is all about finding slopes. That's all we're really concerned with here is how to find slopes, because that's the pre-work, the precursor before I'm able to write my equation. So these are the hardest to, in my opinion, just because, well, they're not really harder, but they take more work. So here's an example. Let me get my highlighter out here. So it says we want to write the equation of a line through the point. So once again, we have our point, and it is perpendicular to this line. So if I'm thinking about my needs, my two needs, I need a point and I need a slope to write my equation. Do I have a point? Yes, I have a point, 6, 5. Do I have a slope? No, I do not have a slope. The only other information I have is that I'm perpendicular to this line right here. So let's think for a second. I need to be able to write my equation, I need the slope and a point. I do not have my slope right now. This is the only information I have. So this line is perpendicular to my line, right? So whatever its slope is, my slope will be the opposite reciprocal of this slope. Okay, so let's find the slope of this. Do I know how to find the slope of this? Well, yeah, that was 2 lessons ago. Remember I said if you could just solve for y, whatever is nestled up against x after you solve for y, that is the slope. So let's do that work. Let's solve for y. Solve for y. So let's see, 2x minus 3y equals 11. Now, this is the 4th lesson in a row where being able to solve an equation for y is important. So if you cannot solve an equation for y, you need to get help somewhere, okay? You need to watch YouTube videos or something until you can solve for y. So let's move the 2x. I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. Okay. And I'll be left with a minus 3y, or negative 3y equals, now 11 and 2x are not like, because this has an x, this doesn't, so I cannot combine them. This is all I can do is write them beside each other. Now I need to divide all 3 pieces by negative 3. Okay, now be very careful here. These are gone, so I have y equals 11 over negative 3. That does not reduce. And then be very careful here. Negative and a negative, ugly daddy, ugly mama. That's going to make a pretty baby. And 2 over 3, does that reduce? No, it doesn't. So 2 over 3x. So what is the slope of this line? 2/3. All right, take a pause for a second. Breathe. Now, is this going to be the slope that we use? Well, what do we know about this line? It's perpendicular, so I need the opposite reciprocal slope. My slope will be the opposite of this one. This one's positive, so my slope will be negative, and it will be the reciprocal of this. This one's 2 over 3. My slope will be 3 over 2. Okay, 3 over 2, the opposite reciprocal of this slope, because this slope is perpendicular to our slope. So now, that was a lot of work to get ready to do the problem. But let's look at it. Do I have a point now? Yes. Do I have my slope now? Yes. That was a lot of work to find my slope, but I do have my slope. So let's plug those pieces in for the slope and the y and the x value. So let's see, what is the y value there? 5. Be careful not to get the x and y value mixed up. What's the slope? Negative 3/2. And what's the x value? 6. Okay, awesome. So let's plug those in. Y minus 5 equals negative 3/2 x minus 6. Okay, now let's get the correct form. I'm going to distribute, and then next step I'll move the 5 over. So let's distribute first. Negative 3/2 times x, that's actually easy even though it's a fraction because we just stick it beside the x. And then let's be careful here. You may want to grab a calculator if you struggle multiplying fractions by whole numbers. Negative 3/2 times negative 6 or minus 6, that's going to be a positive. And what that will be is 9. If you did some scratch work out to the side, that would give you 18 over 2 or 9. Okay. So now we just need to add the 5 over. Plus 5 plus 5. So y equals negative 3/2 x. Now be very careful here. Positive 9 plus 5, that's positive 14. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Okay. So that was as hard as we can make it. We made you find a slope from a perpendicular line and plug in a point and a slope to find our equation. Okay. Let's do a parallel one just to make sure we've done one of each type. But a parallel one's a little bit easier. And I'm going to cheat and use this same equation. So what was the slope of this equation? Why don't I just copy it? Draw, copy. All right. So this is our next problem. Find the equation of a line that's passing through this point 6, 8. And notice this time we're parallel to this line. Okay. So let's talk about, okay, what are my needs? I need a point, and I need a slope. Well, I have the point. The point is 6, negative 8. What's the slope? I don't know it. I do know that I am parallel to this line. Now, we would do the same thing. We would take 2x minus 3y equals 11. I need to find its slope to use it. And we actually know once we solve it, or once we solve for y, because we did this on the last slide. This is just from the last slide. The slope of this thing's 2/3. Now, how are my line and that line related? They're parallel. Remember, parallel means we're going to have the same slope. So this slope is 2/3, so my slope is also going to be 2/3. Okay? So all we're using this information for right here is to find a slope. So now, do I have a point? Do I have a slope? Now I can write my equation. And plug in the pieces. The 3 numbers, let's see, what's the slope? 2/3. What's the x value? 6, and the y value is negative 8. Be very careful with signs there. This is minus a negative 8 equals 2/3 x minus 6. I would suggest you take an extra step to write minus a negative as, I said, change colors, as plus 8. You probably could have distributed as well, but alright, so let's distribute and then we'll subtract 8 over. So distribute, that'll be 2/3 x, and distribute again. This is a minus 6 and a positive, so it's going to be minus 2/3 times 6. What is that? I believe it's 4. If we do that out to the side, yeah, that's 12 over 3, or just 4. Okay, so this is where we're sitting. Now I just need to subtract 8 from both sides. Let me scroll down a little bit. So y equals 2/3 x minus 4 minus 8. It's going to be minus 12. And we are finished. We have written our equation. So those last two are really involved, parallel and perpendicular ones. But look at this. It's pretty simple. We have all these different situations we can give you. But what you need is a point and a slope. That's where everything goes back to. And sometimes you have to do work to find the slope, whether it's find the slope from 2 points or compare it to parallel or perpendicular lines. Sometimes we give it to you, and you just need to stick those 3 numbers in and work it. Okay? I do want to ask 2 more questions. That's pretty much all I have for you, but I want to ask is, could you, what's the equation of the line, let's say a vertical line through a point? Let's do 2, 5. And while we're at it, what's the equation of a horizontal line? And we'll do the same point through the point 2, 5. Could you write those equations? These, remember, anytime we're talking about horizontal or vertical lines, remember those are special cases. And remember, vertical lines always are the equation x equals. In vertical lines, I don't know what I said. Did I say vertical? I feel like I said horizontal. Vertical lines are always x equals, and horizontal lines are always y equals. And they're just equal to a number. And it's really easy to write these equations because it's x equal to, what's the x value from this point? 2, remember, because that's xy. So a vertical line will just be x equal 2. What's the y value from this point? 5. So a horizontal line will just be y equals 5. So I can write these really quickly with no work. You will get, usually on the test, 4 equations to write. One of these 2, one of the parallel or perpendicular, not both. One where they give you 2 points and you have to find the slope. And then one where they give you everything and you just plug it in. That's usually how the test goes. They're writing the test right now. They're not finished. So those are just things to look for. Awesome. That's all I have for you. I hope you have a good day, and I will see you next time.